Should you lift your Jeep? Let's talk about it. So I get a lot of questions from you guys on Instagram asking what you should do to your Jeep, stuff like that. And honestly, I wanted to make a video on the topic of if you should even start lifting your Jeep. And this is kind of like a part 2 to the last video talking about what we recommended if you're gonna lift your Jeep. So these 1999 to 2004 Jeep Grand Cherokees, they're called Jeep WJs, if you didn't know. They're a pretty old car. Some are over 20 years old. So with the Jeeps being about 20 years old, these Jeeps are gonna have issues, okay? Most of them are around close to 200,000 miles. So, and a lot of these Jeeps aren't maintenance as well. Like in the previous video, all the steering components, they were trashed, they were gone, never been replaced. And that's the case with most of these Jeeps that are on the market. Not only worn out components, engine maintenance as well. Like the 4.0s, the crank position sensor tends to go bad. The 4.7s, they have some head issues where the valve drops. These engines have a lot of miles on them nowadays, so that's another thing to consider. Now, the reason people like the Jeep WJs, the reason why people buy them to lift them is because they are a straight axle Jeep. Springs and shocks, that's what controls the axle, versus a leaf spring setup or an independent front suspension setup, which isn't the greatest for off-roading, but it is great for comfort. And the reason that it's great for comfort is because each individual wheel on the front can move independently from each other compared to the straight axle. If there's a bump on the road, it's gonna move like both sides of the axles. But to get the most performance off-roading, you're gonna wanna do a lot of stuff to the Jeep. Depending on the tire size, you might need to change out the axles. Definitely want long arms in the front at a minimum. Rear, if you can afford it as well. The long arms for the rear are about $1,500. The long arms for the front are about $1,200. And then springs, probably around $400. Shocks, maybe another $500–600. It adds up, you know, there's more parts to that, like brake lines, sway bar links, drive shafts, slip yoke eliminators, things like that. There's a lot of stuff that you're gonna do to a Jeep if you lift it, which is why I am telling you this. Do you need to lift your Jeep? I don't know, I don't think so, depending on what you want out of the Jeep. So on the last video, if you watched it, Ross's Jeep, that blue one, was passed down from his wife's family. That Jeep was stock and it went through a bunch of trails that lifted Jeeps usually go on. The owner was telling me that he's been through like rock gardens with it, and I looked at the bottom of the Jeep. You could definitely tell it went through rock gardens, and he said that he made it fine, and that was stock, just with all-terrain tires, not even mud terrain. All-terrain tires, stock, he made it through. He said he was riding along with Jeep Wranglers that were lifted, and I have personally experienced that as well. I've been on some runs where some stock Jeeps, they went and they handled the trail. If you're gonna do major rock climbing, I would definitely recommend lifting it up at least 4 inches with front long arms and rear adjustable control arms, or rear long arms if you can afford it. And now if you're going 6 inches, you definitely want front and rear long arms, extended brake lines, a custom drive shaft, slip yoke eliminator in the rear. This is so you get the maximum performance and the most comfortable ride that you can get out of the Jeep. If you do a budget boost or like a 2-inch lift, which is what I recommend for most people, is to just get the springs, the 2-inch springs over the budget boost. But if you need something cheaper, the budget boost will get you by. I would honestly still recommend at least getting front adjustable control arms for that budget boost or that 2-inch lift, because when you lift it, it is gonna bring the axle back. The arms, they're fixed position, so when you lift it, think of it going like down like that. Now when you add a long arm, it's only gonna go down like that compared to that much angle. That's the reason that there is long arms, is when you go with the higher lift, there's less angle on that pivot. But as I was saying, with the budget boost, if you lift it up, it's gonna push the axle back, and you want to push the axle forward. That way you also get the correct pinion angle for the front. So there you are with the budget boost that costs maybe around $200–300. Plus you have to get control arms. A lot of people in the comments are probably gonna say you don't need the control arms, but honestly, from my experience on Chris's Jeep, you definitely want front adjustable control arms. The lowers to push the axle kind of forward a little bit, or the full set if you can afford it. With the 2-inch spring, depending on your front drive shaft, you also might have to change that out. Dan Code Driveshafts on Facebook, he is a great resource for any questions drive shaft related. Anytime someone DMs me about a drive shaft, I send them to Dan. Search him up on Facebook, he will hook you up with a rebuilt drive shaft from a Jeep. So with all that being said, like, the more you lift it, the more money you're gonna spend, and the project is honestly never gonna be done. So maybe you should just keep the Jeep stock. For the most part, you're gonna make it on most trails, especially if it's a 4-wheel drive. For me, one of the biggest difference that I have noticed is the locker. that does work. Like it makes a huge difference off-roading. You can still off-road a two-wheel drive vehicle. I rarely engage my four-wheel drive. With the trails around here, they're mostly fire trails. So in my opinion, as long as you have four-wheel drive on the Jeep, some all-terrain tires, you're doing pretty fine. I don't think you need to lift it right away. Focus more on the maintenance parts than lifting it first. That's something that I wish I did with my Jeep in the beginning. And once you have all those maintenance parts done, you know the engine's running good, then you can look into lifting the Jeep. I would not say to buy the adjustable control arms if you're gonna go long arm in the future. Save up, wait that year. I waited a whole year to save up money for my lift kit. Now they're a little bit more expensive than when I bought it, so it probably might take you a little bit longer to save up, but it's worth waiting. Save it up and buy everything that you need at once. Don't buy it in parts how I'm doing right now, because it's just gonna take longer to finish the Jeep. Like I still got some stuff to do, like the steering. I want to upgrade the gearbox. I have the rear long arms to put on. I have some 6.5-inch springs now, so it's gonna go taller. Like that, you know what I'm saying? Like there's always gonna be something new to add on. It's better if you buy it from the beginning, write down a plan, have all the parts you need, and then save up and buy the parts after you maintenance the Jeep. If you have a stock Jeep, put some all-terrain tires on it, you will do good off-road. I hope this cleared up some information with lifting a Jeep, or if you shouldn't. If it did help you, leave a comment down below. And if you have more questions, you can ask me on Instagram, Nadjar Offroad, and make sure to visit nadjaroffroad.com. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.